They say a mother never stops loving her child, but what they don't tell you is, sometimes love has to watch in silence while its own child kills it, not with a knife, but with a sentence. That sentence was, "I was raised by my late aunt, the woman who taught me everything." And when my son said it, he looked right into the cameras, smiled proudly, and pretended he didn't see me sitting there, in the back row. The ballroom was glowing golden lights, silk tablecloths, cameras flashing everywhere. It was his night. The businessman of the year. The success story of a small-town boy who built everything from nothing. Except for nothing was me. My name was nowhere. Not in his speech, not in the program, not even in his eyes. It was like I had died, and he had rewritten history before my body was cold. I remember clutching the small purse on my lap, the same one I used to carry sandwiches for him when he was 10. The smell of champagne, the laughter of people in suits, the sound of pride that wasn't mine. My fingers trembled, but I smiled, because that's what mothers do. We smile, even when the world is burning us alive. And when the host said, "Let's give a round of applause to the late aunt who raised such a fine man," people stood up, clapping, cheering. I stood too. Not because I was proud, but because if I didn't, they'd know. They'd see the shame, the betrayal, the knife twisting inside me. He didn't just forget me. He erased me. Erased every sleepless night, every lunch I skipped so he could eat, every tear I hid when his father died. He replaced me with a story that sounded better on camera. And the crowd believed him. When the event ended, he came down from the stage, shaking hands, smiling for photos. Our eyes met just for a second. But he looked away first. He turned to hug a stranger, a woman in diamonds, and I realized he'd rather be seen with her than with the mother who once scrubbed blood from his scraped knees. So I left, quietly. Before the lights turned off, before anyone noticed that the woman who gave him life was walking out the back door. Outside, the city was loud, but I couldn't hear it. All I heard was that one line echoing again and again. I was raised by my late aunt. It played in my head like a curse, like a funeral song for the life I'd lived. I walked to the bus stop, the cold wind pressing against my old shawl. People passed by, their perfumes mixing with exhaust fumes, their laughter cutting through the air like glass. No one knew that a mother had just been buried alive, not in a grave, but in her own child's silence. When I reached home, I sat in the dark. The house smelled of old wood and rain. The photo frames on the wall stared at me, his school graduation, his first bicycle, his wedding. All those years, I thought I was building a home. Turns out, I was just building a man who'd forget where he came from. My neighbor, Mrs. Dalton, knocked softly. She'd seen the event on TV. "Wasn't that your boy, Helen?" she asked. I smiled weakly. "Yes," I whispered. "That's my boy." But in my chest, something cracked, not like glass, but like roots being pulled from the earth. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching headlights crawl across the road, and I remembered every promise he'd made. "When I make it, Mom, I'll buy you a house on the hill. It is a pred. You'll never have to work again. You'll always be my hero." All lies, sweet lies that aged badly, like spoiled fruit. Around 3 a.m., I walked to the shelf and pulled out a dusty box. Inside were old receipts, faded school notes, and one photograph. Him at 7 years old, missing a tooth, holding a wooden plane his father made before he died. I traced his little face with my finger and whispered, "Where did you go, my son? What made you forget me so completely?" I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. That forgetting wasn't his worst sin. That he would go beyond erasing me, he would destroy everything that carried my name. And when life decided to make him remember, it wouldn't be gentle. Because sometimes, life isn't your enemy. It's your mirror. And one day, my son was going to see exactly what he had done, not through my tears, but through his own. If you're still here with me, tell me in the comments where you're watching or listening from. I read every single one, from Maryland to Manila, from London to Louisiana. And if this story already touched something in your heart, subscribe to Voices of Auntie, because these are not just family revenge stories. They're reminders that love, once forgotten, always finds its way back. Morning came gray and hollow. The kind of morning that doesn't care you cried the whole night before. The rain had stopped, but everything still smelled of sorrow, even the curtains, even the floorboards. I made myself tea, but it tasted like nothing. That's the thing about heartbreak. It steals your appetite first, then your voice. I thought maybe a walk would help, maybe some fresh air. But when I opened the door, there it was, a plain brown envelope, wet from the rain, shoved under my doormat. No name, no address, just delivered. I opened it. Inside was a single letter from the local tax office. Notification: property transfer confirmed. Ownership is now registered to Mr. Michael Carter. I froze. That was my house. My late husband's name had been on that deed for 40 years. And now it said Michael, my son. I thought it was a mistake. So I grabbed my umbrella and went straight to the city office. The young clerk behind the glass barely looked up. He typed a few things, frowned, then said, "No mistake, ma'am. The property was legally transferred 3 months ago." My heart skipped. Transferred? By who? He turned the screen toward me. There, next to my signature, my own name, were shaky letters that weren't mine. I said quietly, "That's not my handwriting." He sighed. "Ma'am, if you signed this while under a medical condition, we'll need verification from your son or your physician." Medical condition? What are you talking about? I asked. He hesitated, then leaned closer. "It says here you were recently diagnosed with early-stage dementia, filed by your son for protection of assets." For a moment, the room spun. The noise of typewriters, footsteps, people talking all melted into a dull ringing in my ears. Dementia? He said I had dementia? That's how he did it. He didn't just erase me in public, he erased me on paper. He turned me into a ghost with shaking hands and no memory, so he could take everything I'd built. I walked out of that office trembling, clutching the fake document like it might burn me. The rain had started again, and every drop hit like a truth I didn't want to hear. At home, I tore open every drawer, every folder, searching for the copy of my will, the bank letters, anything that still had my real signature. But half of it was gone, vanished. And that's when it hit me. He hadn't planned this yesterday. He'd been planning it for years. All those times he asked about my papers, all those visits where he smiled too politely, all those questions about my health. He was building a lie. I sat down in the dark. And for the first time in my life, I didn't cry for losing him. I cried because I'd raised a man who could do this. That night, I called his number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Then again. Nothing. So I called his office. The receptionist said politely, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter. Mr. Carter asked not to be disturbed by family matters." Very Tainix, it'd be a flytergatamarnis. Family matters. That's what I was now, a matter. The next morning, I went to his company anyway. The security guard at the front desk recognized me. "Ma'am, you can't just walk in," he said awkwardly. "I'm his mother," I said. He looked down at his clipboard. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but he said you're not allowed past the lobby." And then he whispered, like he was ashamed to say it aloud. "He told us you get confused sometimes." Confused. That word cut deeper than betrayal. Because I realized he wasn't just stealing from me. He was rewriting who I was. I turned and walked out, my chest tight, my pride bleeding in slow motion. On the street, people brushed past, umbrellas clattering, nobody knowing that an old woman had just lost not only her home, but her name, her sanity, her truth. But here's the thing about mothers like me. We survive. Even when forgotten. Even when erased. We find a way back. That night, I sat by the window again, holding a candle. I looked at my husband's photograph. He had been gone 25 years, but his eyes still looked kind. I whispered to him like I used to. "You told me once, love without respect isn't love at all." I should have remembered that sooner. Then I took the fake deed, folded it carefully, and placed it into a box right next to the old receipts, the photo, the letter he once sent me from college. Not to keep as proof, but as a reminder. If my son wanted to play with lies, I would answer him with the truth. Not the loud kind that shouts in courtrooms, the kind that waits, the kind that watches. The kind that comes back when karma finally forgets who's innocent. Because you can't build an empire on betrayal forever. It always cracks. And when it does, every brick remembers the hands that first laid it. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. But I promised myself one thing that night. He may have taken my house, but I will make life return what he stole, even if it's the last thing I do. And as I blew out the candle, I felt something inside me shift, not anger, not grief. Something sharper. A will. If you're still listening right now, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Every night, I read your words from Texas, from Manila, from Nairobi, and I promise you, this story is only getting started. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie so you don't miss the next chapter of this journey. Because in these family revenge stories, sometimes justice doesn't shout, it whispers back. The next morning, I found a flyer stuck in my gate. Community Cleanup Day sponsored by Carter Realty. It's at Presenham, my son's company. The same company that took my house, my name, and my sanity. His smiling face was printed across the top, next to the slogan, "Building homes, building hope. Homes, hope." He was building them with the pieces he stole from me. I laughed, a short, bitter sound that didn't feel like laughter at all. I tore the flyer in half and threw it into the trash. But as it fell, I saw something else, a small, hand-drawn note taped to my mailbox. "Mrs. Carter, I'm doing a documentary about local families. Could I interview you?" I almost threw that away too, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the word documentary. Maybe it was the word family. Maybe it was the quiet voice inside me whispering, "Maybe someone should finally hear your side." She came that afternoon. A young woman, barely 20, camera in one hand, notebook in the other. Her name was Leah. She had soft eyes, the kind that listen more than they judge. "I heard about the award ceremony," she said gently. "I was filming there. I saw you leave early." I froze. "You saw me?" She nodded. "And I saw him," she added quietly. "The way he looked through you." That line hit harder than she knew. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. Someone had seen me. "I don't want pity," I told her. "I want the truth to exist somewhere other than in my own head." Leah smiled. "Then let's make that truth visible." We started small. She'd come every afternoon asking me to tell stories not about revenge, but about memories. How I met my husband. How Michael used to fix broken clocks in the kitchen. How he'd whisper, "Mom, I'll buy you a car one day, one with air conditioning." We laughed. But sometimes I'd stop mid-sentence, the laughter turning into something tight and fragile. Because each happy memory felt like proof that somewhere along the way, love had lost its way home. Leah didn't press me. She just turned off the camera, made tea, and said, "We'll continue when you're ready." One day, while helping me sort through papers, she found something strange. A folder labeled Community Property Transfer Restricted. Inside were photocopies, my signature, my ID, my husband's will, and a separate page stamped Medical Declaration, Cognitive Decline. "That's how he did it," Leah whispered. Her voice shook. "He built a fake narrative, said you weren't capable of making decisions." I stared at the documents, my hands trembling. Why would my own child go that far? Invernative filler. She said nothing. She didn't have to. We both knew why. Because power tastes sweeter when it comes from betrayal. That night, Leah uploaded a short clip, only 2 minutes long. A nameless video titled, "The Forgotten Mother." It showed nothing but my hands old, trembling, folding a photo of my son into a box. No face, no name, just a voiceover. When your own blood forgets you. Sometimes silence becomes your loudest scream. Within 48 hours, it had 100,000 views. People began commenting, "Who is she? Where's the rest of her story? Find her." The next day, someone from a local paper showed up at my door. They didn't know I was her. But I saw the headline they were holding. Carter Realty accused of unethical land deals, whistleblower leaks documents. My breath caught. The truth was bubbling to the surface, not because I shouted, but because life was starting to remember for me. Later that week, Leah convinced me to take a walk near one of his new housing sites. Rows of half-finished homes, shiny banners, and a billboard with his smiling face. From dreams to deeds, Michael Carter Homes. But near the corner, I saw a woman elegant, sharp, dressed in designer clothes. She was talking to a man in a black car. Leah zoomed in. "That's his wife," I said. Or was. I hadn't seen her since their wedding, the woman who once came to my kitchen asking to borrow money for her first business. I'd given it to her, thinking kindness would circle back one day. It did, only this time, it came holding a knife. We recorded just enough to capture the deal. Her handing a folder, the man counting money, a whispered line caught in the wind. "She'll never find out. The old woman's already declared unstable." That was all Leah needed. She looked at me, eyes blazing. "We can expose them, Mrs. Carter." I hesitated. "What if it destroys him?" She said softly. "He destroyed you first." That night, I sat in my room, candlelight flickering on the walls. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about legacy. What kind of story would survive me? The lie my son told, or the truth I had lived? I looked at the box on the shelf, the fake deed, the forged papers, the photo of his 7th birthday. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, I felt something new. Not anger, not pain, purpose. I turned to Leah and said, "Let's show them who I really am. Let's make the world remember me, so that one day when he looks up my name, he'll see the mother he forgot." Leah pressed record. The red light blinked softly, and I began to speak. "My name is Helen Carter. I am not sick. I am not senile. I am a mother who was erased but not gone. And this is my story." If you're still listening right now, tell me in the comments where you're watching or listening from. I love reading your stories from California to Singapore, from Toronto to Cape Town. You remind me this voice is being heard. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tay so you don't miss the next chapter, because this family revenge story is only beginning. Sometimes silence hides power, and sometimes power hides in a mother's truth. The video Leah posted had begun to spread. At first it was just whispers, people wondering who that trembling voice belonged to. But then one night, a comment appeared under the clip. "Is this about Michael Carter's mother?" After that, silence didn't exist anymore. By morning, blogs were talking. By noon, reporters were calling. And by evening, my son called too. His voice, cold and sharp, cut through the phone like a blade. "What the hell are you doing, Mom?" "I'm telling the truth," I said quietly. "The truth?" he hissed. "The truth is you're confused and this girl is using you to get attention. You're embarrassing me." I almost laughed. Embarrassing him? He'd stolen my name, my house, my dignity, but I was the problem. "I just want people to know I'm not crazy," I whispered. He sighed heavily. "Mom, I'll fix this. But you have to stop talking to her. You're not well." Not well. That phrase again. Every time he said it, a part of me died a little more. "I'm fine," I said. "I remember everything you've done." The line went silent for a moment. Then his voice turned colder than winter. "Then maybe you shouldn't remember so much." And he hung up. 3 days later, a letter arrived, stamped with his company logo. It was an invitation. Carter Realty charity event honoring family values and community integrity. Family values. The irony almost made me choke. Leah begged me not to go. "It's a trap," she warned. But something inside me said I needed to. I needed to see just how far he'd go to erase me. So that night, I put on my best dress, the same one I'd worn to his graduation, and I went. The ballroom looked familiar. The same golden chandeliers, the same laughter echoing off marble floors. But this time, I wasn't the invisible mother in the back. This time, every step I took made people whisper. "She came. That's his mom, right? There's Sutter Place. I heard she's not all there." I kept walking. My hands shook, but I didn't stop. Leah followed quietly behind, her small camera tucked into her purse. Then I saw him standing at the podium, shaking hands with sponsors, that same polished smile painted across his face. When his eyes met mine, something flickered. Guilt? Anger? No, it was calculation. He turned to the crowd and said, "Before we begin, I want to acknowledge someone very special. The woman who inspired me to care for families everywhere, my dear mother." The crowd clapped, but his tone felt wrong. He gestured toward me, smiling too wide. "She's here tonight. Everyone, please give her a warm welcome." Spotlights hit my face. People turned. For a second, I almost believed he meant it. Then he spoke again. "My mother's been struggling lately. You know how age and memory can be. But despite it all, she's always believed I could make a difference." Laughter rippled through the room. Not cruel. Not loud, just enough to cut me open. Leah's hand gripped my arm. "Don't," she whispered. But I couldn't stop myself. I walked toward the stage. He stepped back slightly, pretending to guide me up the stairs. The cameras turned. Every flash felt like lightning. I stood beside him, trembling. "Michael," I said softly into the mic. "I remember more than you think." He laughed nervously. "See?" he said to the audience. "She's always dramatic. She was a wonderful mother, even if she gets a little mixed up now." The crowd chuckled. My heart cracked open, but I didn't back down. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope, the forged property deed, the one with my fake signature. "This," I said, my voice shaking, Is my memory the one you forged? Ring says now that every 4-7. Ring says was in ham tensed it was best. The room fell silent. For a second the mask slipped from his face. Then he smiled again, tight, practiced. Mom, please, he said, taking the paper gently. You see, she's confused again. These are old documents. We've already handled this legally. The crowd murmured. Security began to move closer. I looked around, hundreds of faces. Not one willing to see the truth. Tell them I'm lying, I whispered. Look me in the eye and tell them. He didn't. He just nodded to the guards. Please escort her somewhere safe. Leah tried to film, but one guard blocked her camera. Ma'am, this is private property. I was led out through the back door again. The same way I'd left that award night. History repeating itself, crueler this time. Outside, rain began to fall. Harder, colder. Each drop hitting my skin like a slap. Leah found me minutes later under the awning. Her eyes were red. I recorded everything, she said. But I'm so sorry, I couldn't stop them. I smiled through the tears. You did enough. The world saw what kind of son he is. But deep down, I knew he'd win the headlines. He had money, lawyers, the perfect smile, and I had nothing but truth. But truth is patient. It waits. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, I sat by my window again, the candlelight flickering on the rain-soaked glass. And I whispered, if I must be humiliated for the truth, then let it be public. Because once humiliation turns into silence, the liar wins. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of knocking. Leah stood at my door, her face pale but determined. She handed me her phone. On the screen, the video she'd secretly uploaded. Title: When a Mother Speaks, the World Should Listen. It already had 300,000 views. And the comments. She's not crazy. That's manipulation. She deserves justice. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small. I felt seen. I looked at Leah, and I said quietly, he used a stage to humiliate me. I'll use the truth to haunt him. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come with shouting. It comes with silence that spreads like fire. If you're still listening now, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Every city, every country, I read them all. Your words remind me why these family drama stories matter. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie for the next chapter. Because this family revenge story is far from over. The storm has only just begun, and sometimes the thunder answers for those who were silenced. The world moves fast, but sometimes justice moves faster. 2 days after the charity event, Leah's video went viral. Not just a few thousand views, millions. People didn't just watch, they felt. They saw an old woman standing under bright lights, holding a fake deed and shaking hands, and a son pretending she was confused. They saw humiliation, but they also saw truth. The comments poured in. She's not crazy. She's brave. He's the one who's lost his mind to greed. Justice for the forgotten mother. By morning, journalists were at my gate. By noon, I was on every local channel. And by evening, Michael's sponsors started backing out one by one. The next time I saw his face, it wasn't on a billboard. It was on the news. Carter Realty under investigation for fraudulent property transfers. Leah turned off the TV and whispered, "It's starting." But I didn't smile. Because revenge doesn't taste sweet when it's your own child choking on it. Michael called again that night. But his voice wasn't angry this time. It was desperate. "Mom, please. Tell them it's not true. Tell them you're sick, that you didn't mean it." I stayed silent. The same silence he gave me when I begged him to remember who I was. And then I said softly, "You taught me, son. When someone forgets love, they learn fear instead." He hung up before I could finish. Over the next few weeks, everything began to crumble. His company lost investors. Clients sued. And then, the biggest blow of all, his wife left. At first I didn't believe it. But then Leah showed me a clip she'd received from an anonymous source. His wife walking out of their mansion, dragging 2 suitcases behind her, and shouting at the cameras, "Ask him about the stolen contracts. Ask him whose money built this house." The tabloids ate it up. But I just sat quietly by the window, sipping tea. Because sometimes you don't need to shout when the storm shouts for you. A week later, there was a knock on my door. Leah opened it and froze. Standing there was a man in a dark suit, holding an envelope. He said, "Delivery for Mrs. Helen Carter." Inside was a letter. written in Michael's handwriting. Mom, I know you hate me now. Maybe you should. But everything I did, I thought it would make you proud. I wanted to prove I wasn't poor anymore. I wanted you to see your son as someone the world respected. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't want to look small beside you. Please, help me fix this. I read it 3 times. Each word was a knife wrapped in apology. Leah asked softly, "Will you forgive him?" I didn't answer. Forgiveness is a heavy word. Sometimes it feels like letting go of the only weapon you have left. Then came the lawsuit. The government officially opened a case against Carter Realty. They called me to testify not as a victim, but as the original property owner. When I walked into that courtroom, I wasn't the broken woman who once stood under bright lights. I was steady, calm, ready. Michael sat at the defendant's table, eyes hollow, skin pale. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked smaller, not in height, but in soul. The judge asked, "Mrs. Carter, do you confirm this signature was forged?" I looked straight ahead. Yes. The lawyer for the defense tried to shake me. "Mrs. Carter, are you certain? Given your age and medical record." I cut him off. My age doesn't erase my memory. Betrayal doesn't need glasses to recognize itself. A quiet gasp filled the courtroom. Even Michael lowered his head. Leah was sitting in the back, recording discreetly. Later, she told me that clip became one of the most shared moments of the trial. A line that people started quoting online. Betrayal doesn't need glasses. When the verdict came, the judge's words felt like thunder breaking a long drought. The property shall be returned to its rightful owner, Mrs. Helen Carter. Carter Realty is found guilty of document falsification and unethical practices. My hands trembled. I didn't smile. I just breathed. Deep, slow, steady. Justice didn't bring joy. It brought peace, and that's stronger. As I walked out of the courthouse, cameras flashed again, but this time, I didn't hide my face. I raised my head high. Someone shouted, "Mrs. Carter, any words for your son?" I turned to the microphones and said quietly, "A mother's voice doesn't fade. Even when it's ignored, it echoes until the truth answers." And then expert est. That night, when I returned home, the mailbox was full. Letters from strangers, from other mothers, some handwritten, some printed. Your courage gave me strength. My own son hasn't called me in years, but your story made me believe again. You made the forgotten visible. Leah sat beside me, smiling through tears. "You didn't just win," she said. "You changed people." I looked at the candle on my table, the same one that burned through every night of doubt. And I whispered, I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to be remembered. Days later, I saw a news clip. Michael walking out of the courthouse, reporters shouting questions. He didn't answer any. He looked up once, at the sky, then down again, as if searching for forgiveness in the pavement. Leah asked if I wanted to talk to him. I said no, not yet. Life would handle that part, because sometimes life remembers when we try to forget. And it was only a matter of time before it made him remember too. If you're still listening now, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Your words from New York to Nairobi, from Manila to Melbourne remind me how far a mother's voice can travel. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie so you don't miss the next part of this family revenge story. Because in the next chapter, when my son finally came back, it wasn't forgiveness he asked for. It was something far deeper. A month passed after the verdict. The news cycle moved on, but the silence in my house didn't. Some nights I'd wake up at 3 a.m., half expecting the phone to ring, to hear his voice saying, "Mom, I'm sorry, let me come home." But it never came. Instead, what came was rain. Endless, heavy, mournful rain that drummed on the windows like unanswered prayers. I thought I'd made peace with everything, but peace is tricky. It looks like still water, but the storm always hides underneath. One evening, as the sky turned a bruised purple, there was a soft knock on my door. When I opened it, there was no one there. Only a small envelope, wet from the storm. No return address. Just my name, written in a familiar hand. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside were 2 things: a folded piece of paper and a small photograph. Me and him, at his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling, before ambition replaced affection. The letter began, "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I finally ran out of people to lie to. The company's gone. The house, too. She left me, and I don't blame her. I don't blame anyone but myself. You were right. Success means nothing when you have to erase the person who gave you your first chance at life. I've spent weeks wondering how I got here, and the answer's simple. I forgot who raised me. I forgot you. I forgot love. I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know. I remember now. Every word, every meal, every prayer you said when you thought I wasn't listening. I remember everything. I didn't realize I was crying until the ink on the page began to blur. Leah came in quietly, saw me holding the letter, and didn't ask a thing. She just wrapped a blanket over my shoulders and whispered, "You knew he'd come back somehow." But I didn't. I never thought he'd come back like this. Broken, stripped of pride, finally human again. That night, lightning cracked across the sky. The storm howled louder than my heart. I found myself standing by the door, watching the road, like I used to when he was young and stayed out too late. And then, headlights in the distance. A car. Old, battered, coughing smoke. It pulled up in front of my gate and stopped. The driver's door opened slowly, and there he was. My son. Not the man from the TV screens or magazine covers, but the boy I once raised, now older, thinner, his face washed clean of arrogance, replaced by something I hadn't seen in years. Remorse. He didn't speak. He just stood there in the rain, soaked to the bone, holding nothing but a paper bag. "Mom," his voice cracked. I didn't know where else to go. I wanted to run to him, to hold him, to say it was all okay, but my body didn't move. Too many ghosts stood between us. The lies, the shame, the silence. He took a step closer. "I lost everything," he said softly. "I thought I was winning, but every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the man you warned me not to become." The wind howled through the trees. Thunder rolled overhead. He fell to his knees on the muddy path, crying like the boy who once scraped his knees in my kitchen. "I'm sorry, Mom. Not for losing, for forgetting, for making you disappear." And in that moment, I understood something I never had before. Revenge doesn't heal. Recognition does. When someone finally sees you again, that's when the wound stops bleeding. I knelt beside him. The rain drenched us both. I placed my hand on his cheek, cold and trembling. "You remembered," I whispered. "That's enough." He shook his head. "No, it isn't. I came to give this back." He said Condictus refers with seed. From the paper bag, he pulled out a small wooden box, the one his father built for him as a child, where we used to store keepsakes. His first drawing, his father's watch, and the key to the house. "I kept this all these years," he said, "but I don't deserve it. It belongs here." He placed it in my hands. Lightning flashed behind him, turning the rain into silver fire. For a moment, it felt like the world held its breath, like even the sky was listening. Later that night, I sat by the window again, the same spot I'd sat in during every heartbreak, every silence, every storm. Michael was asleep on the couch, his shoes still muddy. His face was finally peaceful. Leah had stayed the night, too, editing clips quietly in the corner, her camera capturing not the scandal, but the after. The part where a mother doesn't shout, doesn't punish, doesn't forget. She just watches her child come home. I looked at the wooden box again. Inside, along with the watch and the keys, was a note he must have added before coming. "For every day I forgot you, may I spend the rest of my life remembering." I closed the lid slowly, whispering to the darkness. That's how healing begins. Not when they say sorry, but when they finally remember who they hurt. Outside, the storm began to fade. The clouds broke apart, and a faint light spilled through the trees. Morning was coming. If you're still here with me, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read everyone from Boston to Brisbane, from Lagos to London, and every word reminds me that these stories travel farther than pain ever could. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie so you don't miss the final part of this family revenge story. Because in the end, when the rain stopped and the sun returned, life didn't just make him remember. It made him rebuild what he destroyed. The next morning, sunlight crept through the curtains. Soft, golden, almost shy, as if even the sky didn't want to disturb what peace had finally returned. For the first time in years, my house didn't feel haunted by silence. It felt alive again. I walked quietly to the living room. Michael was still asleep on the couch, his body curled up like the boy he once was. The same boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, whispering, "Don't let go, Mom." And I never did. Not really. On the table beside him was a note he'd written sometime during the night. "I don't know if I can ever undo what I've done, but I want to spend whatever's left of my life trying." There was something else under the note. The old key to the house, shined and polished, as if he'd spent the night cleaning it with his hands. Later that morning, Leah arrived. When she saw him still sleeping, she froze. "He came back?" I nodded. He remembered. She smiled, tears filling her eyes. "Then your story's not just a warning anymore," she said. "It's a homecoming. I made breakfast eggs, coffee, toast, the way I used to when he was young." The smell filled the room like forgiveness. When he finally woke up, he blinked at me, confused for a moment, then whispered, "You're still here." I laughed softly. "I never went anywhere, Michael. You just stopped looking." He lowered his head, shame heavy in his voice. "I don't deserve to be here. Meinst Ender." I sat down across from him. "You don't," I said gently. "But love doesn't work like a reward. It's a bridge, and you're standing on it again." He nodded, eyes glistening. "Then let me rebuild it brick by brick." In the days that followed, he stayed quietly, humbly. No phone calls, no business suits, just work boots, rolled sleeves, and silence that healed instead of hurt. He fixed the roof that had leaked for years. He repaired the old porch his father built. He even painted the fence white again, the same color it was when he was a boy. Every evening, we'd sit on the steps, watching the sun dip below the trees. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. Sometimes he'd tell stories about the mistakes he made, the lies he told to climb higher, and how the air at the top felt thin because there was no one left to share it with. One night, he asked me quietly, "Mom, do you ever wish you hadn't fought back?" I smiled. "No, son, because if I hadn't, you'd never know what truth costs." He looked down, nodding slowly. "And forgiveness?" he asked. "Forgiveness," I said, "isn't saying what you did is okay. It's saying I'm not going to let it poison me anymore." Weeks later, Leah visited again, camera in hand. She wanted to film one final scene for her documentary, not of the courtroom or the headlines, but of what came after. "Sit together," she said softly. "Just talk," like nothing ever happened. We sat side by side on the porch. The golden light washed over us, gentle and warm. Leah hit record. "Mom," Michael said suddenly, looking straight into the camera, "I know the world saw my sins before it saw my face. I can't change that. But I hope they also see this, that I remembered. That I came home." I put my hand over his. "And I hope they see this," I said, "that even when forgotten, a mother's love waits. Not for revenge, but for redemption." Leah wiped her eyes behind the lens. "Got it," she whispered. "It's perfect. That video, the last one Leah ever made about us, didn't go viral like the others. It didn't need to. It found its audience quietly, in the hearts of people who still believed that broken families can heal, that forgotten mothers can be remembered, that endings can still be kind. Letters came from everywhere. From daughters, from fathers, from sons who hadn't spoken to their mothers in years. One wrote, "I called my mom today, because of you. And that, more than any victory, was the justice I'd prayed for." One evening, as the sun sank low, Michael sat beside me again. He held my hand and said softly, "You once told me life will make me remember. You were right, but it also made me rebuild." He pointed to the field behind the house, the one where he used to play as a child. A wooden frame stood there now, half finished. "What's that?" I asked. He smiled. "A community home," he said, "for seniors who've been forgotten by their families. A place where no one's ever invisible." I stared at him. Not the man who betrayed me, but the son who finally understood why love matters. Tears filled my eyes. I whispered, "Then build it well, son, because this time, it's not just a house. It's a second chance." He nodded. "I'll name it after you." "No," I said, smiling. "Name it after what you lost and found again." He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Home." Now, every morning, I wake to the sound of hammers, laughter, and new beginnings. The house echoes with life again. Not the ghosts of the past, but the promise of tomorrow. And sometimes, when I stand by the window, watching him work, I think, life really did make him remember. But in doing so, it made me remember too. That love, when tested, doesn't vanish. It transforms. It rebuilds. It forgives. And it stays. If you're still here with me, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every single one from New York to Nairobi, from Seoul to Saigon, and each one reminds me that love, even when forgotten, travels farther than pain ever will. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie for more family drama stories that break your heart, heal it, and remind you that no mother's love ever truly disappears. Because sometimes, in these family revenge stories, the sweetest revenge is remembering what love was meant to be. When people ask me how I survived, I tell them the truth. I didn't survive because I was strong. I survived because love refused to die quietly. There were nights I thought revenge would heal me. It didn't. It only burned longer. But remembering, that's what saved me. When my son finally came home, I realized something I'd never said out loud. Love doesn't erase what happened. It redeems it. It turns scars into stories. And stories into lessons for those who are still lost. Every house he builds now carries a sign that says, "Home remembers." Every brick is a promise that no parent, no elder, will never be left invisible again. And sometimes, when I walk past that field and see those homes filled with laughter, I whisper to myself, "See, life didn't take from me. It just made room for something better." And the moment because maybe that's what family revenge stories really are. Not tales of anger, but stories of love returning after being forgotten for far too long. So, if you're still listening right now, tell me where you're watching from, and if this story touched something inside you, let it be a reminder you're not alone. Subscribe to Voices of Auntie for more family drama stories that remind us, even when the world forgets, love always remembers.